its importance not just to housing but to the East Lothian economy. On the 25th of March, the former Cabinet Secretary for Housing wrote to the Chief Executive of East Lothian Council confirming the Scottish Government's commitment to support the outlined business case, and my officials will continue to prioritise working with East Lothian Council and others, acting in as pragmatic and positive partner in this project as we can.
Question 5, David Barrett.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on Police Scotland's review of the deployment of forensic tagging spray, including when it expects a decision on its future operational use.
Minister Kirsten Oswald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I can confirm for David Barrett that forensic tagging sprays can invisibly and harmlessly mark a person or a vehicle or a property with a unique ID code. And the use of this kind of technology is, of course, an operational matter for the Chief Constable, but I can confirm that it is being used in different parts of the country, including the North East Division, and the member may be aware it's also going to be introduced in Fife Division. And that technology can be used both as a deterrent but also as a forensic aid. And Police Scotland has commenced a comprehensive review of its use and to consider the potential benefits it has for prevention, for intervention and detection, as well as looking at operational issues. The conclusions of that review are expected before the end of the year.
David Barrett.
I thank the Minister for that response. Forensic sprays are just one of the tools available for the scourge of off-road bikes, e-scooters and e-bikes. These items are already illegal to use anywhere but on private land, but they are sold openly and without disclaimers. Does the Scottish Government have the power to ban or further regulate the sale of off-road bikes, e-scooters and e-bikes?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to commend the Cowdenbeath community, actually, who I know are working hard with the police for their actions here. And on the point that David Barrett makes, the regulation of sales of these items is reserved. However, we have consistently pressed for greater engagement with the UK Government so that we can work together to address this kind of vehicle-related crime. That includes calling for progress on the registration of off-road vehicles. Progress so far has been limited, unfortunately. However, we will continue to press for further action. Of course, that complements the work that Police Scotland are doing. They've undertaken campaigns to improve awareness of where and how these vehicles can be used responsibly, alongside the steps that the responsible retailers should be taking. And I would assure David Barrett that we will continue to press the UK Government to put the registration of off-road vehicles in place as part of managing safe and responsible use.
To ask the Scottish Government when it plans to renew its strategy on preventing knife crime, particularly among young people.
Minister Kirsten Oswald.
I'm grateful to Pauline McNeill. This is an important question she asked, and I would say to her that a new strategy to prevent violence is currently being developed with key stakeholders, including the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit. That will be published later this year, and that strategy will aim at preventing violence from happening in the first instance, and when it does occur, it will focus on reducing further harm. I would add that the principles of the Scottish Government's violence prevention framework do remain embedded in our funded activity for 2026-27. We're providing over £2 million this year to organisations to take forward a range of preventative actions, meaning support for this activity totals £8 million plus since 2023. And I would add that members may have heard the Cabinet Secretary for Justice noting that he was willing to explore all options in this regard.
Paul Menial.
This month, 3 teenagers were convicted of murdering Caden Moy at Irvine Beach last May, but it's just an example. But the superintendent in that case, Graham Gailey, said that violent crime among young people is falling, but that weapon carrying is on the rise. And this is the point that I think the Scottish Government need to think about in their strategy. He said that through our stop and search activity, they've noticed that weapon carrying is on the increase, especially amongst teenagers. But we know some of them carry it because they want to feel safe. I've had some conversations with the legal profession. Please ask a question, actually, because we're trying to get a lot of people in here, and it's, you know, people, the idea is to ask questions and get answers. Please ask a question. But it's a substantial point, Presiding Officer, that I'm trying to get across, but to give the background, and I will. I want the background. I want a question, actually, please. Well, I've got to get a chance to set the context. Okay, I'll ask the question. Have you spoken to has the Government spoken to the legal profession who have defended boys about how, in fact, we can take a different approach to explain to young people the implications for their life I'm really asking the Scottish Government, maybe we need to think about a refresh of their policy.
I appreciate the importance that the member is placing on this issue. It's a matter that is, of course, of concern to all of us, and we're all, I think, equally invested in making sure that the prevention focus that the government has at the heart of its work is something that is absolutely embedded through everything that we are doing in this place. I have spoken about the new strategy that is being developed. Obviously, we have the existing strategy in place. And I would just add that, of course, the vast majority of young people are not engaged in this area, but we do need to have a focus on how we prevent. And as I indicated earlier, the Cabinet Secretary has stated in the last week or so that he is willing to look at all options here, and that would include, if appropriate, a knife amnesty.
Don Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Ensuring that Scotland's communities remain a safe place to live is absolutely crucial, which is why we must invest in early intervention to target those at risk of engaging in crime. So can the Minister advise how this is reflected as a priority in the Scottish Government's approach to tackling knife crime?
Minister.
I'm grateful to Dawn Black for the question and also for her focus on the vital importance of our communities being and feeling safe places to live. We do know that the consequences of knife crime can be devastating. That's why we continue to invest in violence prevention programmes and particularly in early intervention programmes aimed at children and young people. Things like education programmes on the danger and the unacceptability of carrying a knife. For example, the YouthLink Scotland programme, No Lives, Better Lives. That training has provided information to hundreds of frontline practitioners, particularly looking at young people. Of course, there are consequences when offences are committed, and the final element is sustained school and community engagement with young people, for instance, through Police Scotland Youth Volunteers, to make sure that we do have that focus on prevention and creating responsible citizens.
Stephen Kerr.
Why have ministers not delivered the level of proactive policing that's needed to disrupt knife carrying before lives are even put at risk, rather than relying on investigations after another incident has happened?
Minister.
I'm grateful to Stephen Kerr for his question, but I would point him to some of the previous answers that I have given. There needs to be a holistic approach to this. It is a very serious issue, but I have outlined significant elements of the prevention focus, which is part of our approach and a crucial part of our approach. It will take prevention as well as detection, consequences and education if we are to deal effectively and sustainably with this issue.
Question 7, David Kirkwood.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government, following the First Minister's commitment on 26 May regarding the opening of new railway stations, when it will publish details of the potential locations and the development timetables.
Minister Tom Arthur.
As the First Minister set out, the Scottish Government will invest in essential infrastructure across Scotland, including new train stations and ongoing electrification of our rail network. We will advance consideration of a new railway to Ellon, Peterhead and Fraserburgh and are currently examining the case for a link from Tweedbank to Carlisle. We will also deliver a station at Winchborough as set out in the budget 26-27. We are committed to improving Scotland's rail network, as is clearly demonstrated by our delivery of a publicly owned, modernised rail service with improved reliability and accessibility.
David Kirkwood.
Thank you for that answer. Given the opening of the River Tweed Trail, the long-distance path in 2028, which will start in Moffat, the jewel of the south, and run 113 miles to Berwick-on-Tweed, and the probable extension of the Clydesdale Way into Moffat a few years later, it's likely that more than 300,000 additional cyclists and walkers will be visiting a town annually, putting a huge strain on the ability to cope with road traffic. So, will the Minister work with me to urgently advance the Beattock Station Action Group's plan to reopen what could be one of the busiest small stations on the network?
Minister.
I can thank the member for his supplementary, and I'm aware of his particular interest. I'm advised that Transport Scotland officials responded to Suez Trans in June 2023 to confirm that the outcome of their review of Suez Trans' Beattock and Moffat Transport Appraisal Report was that a robust business case had not been made for a Beattock station to progress further in the development process. And while I commend the work done by Suez Trans, the Action Group and the local community, Suez Trans' own transport appraisal report clearly acknowledged, for example, that the option of a rail station at Beattock simply did not, in their words, stack up from an economic perspective. But I appreciate the member raising the point.
Supplementary, Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given the fragility of bus services across Dumfriesshire, will the Minister commit the Cabinet Secretary to a meeting with me whilst he is overseas in order that I can reinforce the case for a station at Beattock, which is now increasingly vital given the fragility of bus services in my constituency?
Minister.
Well, I appreciate the member inviting me to compel the Cabinet Secretary, but I'd be more than happy to relay the member's request on to the Cabinet Secretary.
Question 8, Laura Moody.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the operation of the Accessible Vehicles and Equipment Scheme, including whether any of the changes to the UK Motability Scheme, such as reduced mileage allowances, increased excess mileage charges and changes to lease conditions, will apply to people using the scheme in Scotland, and if so, when?
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville.
The Scottish Government has been working closely with Motability since March, and its notification of changes from 1 July in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. The 1 July commencement is not set to apply in Scotland. These changes by Motability are a direct consequence of the UK Government's decision for a removal of tax exemptions on Motability vehicles in the November 2025 budget. Since that announcement, I have raised concerns with the UK Government, Ministers and Motability, particularly for customers living in rural and island communities. Our discussions with Motability have focused on understanding how the removal of those tax exemptions might affect our Accessible Vehicles and Equipment Scheme, and customers will be notified about any changes as soon as possible.
Laura Moody.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but does she recognise the distress being caused to constituents, including a disabled veteran in my region, by the continued uncertainty around the scheme? And will the Scottish Government commit to a clear timetable and consultation process so that people in Scotland are not left in limbo about a service that is critical to their independence, access to work and family life?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I do recognise that distress, and that's exactly why I raised it with UK Government ministers who don't appear to have looked at this at all before they made their decision in the last budget. Can I commend Motability for their willingness to work with the Scottish Government to not put these measures in place from the 1st of July, but to continue to work with the Scottish Government to see what can be done, because they also recognise the distress and inconvenience this will be causing. I can reassure the member that the reason that this is not happening on the 1st of July is because Motability is keen to work with the Scottish Government to see whether we can work together to make sure that we are doing as much as we can to support those Motability customers. And I would give her that reassurance is important because, as I said at the start, I do very much recognise the distress which has been caused by UK Government decisions in their budget.
Question 9, Caitlin Evans.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it will take to provide sanitation facilities for the traveller community living on land that it owns in Granton in Edinburgh.
Minister Sumita Kumar.
Can I thank Kate Evans for her question? We of course expect local authorities to take the lead in responding to unauthorised encampments, including consideration of welfare needs such as access to sanitation facilities. The Government is of course fulfilling its legal obligations as landowner by taking steps to secure the clearance of unauthorised encampments, and we recognise the significant health and safety risks facing those on the site, but also in the local community. We will of course continue to engage with partners, including the local authority.
Caitlin Evans.
Will the Scottish Government also look to address the ongoing issue of fly tipping on the wider site that is causing distress to local residents and is being incorrectly attributed to traveller communities?
Minister.
Crucial to point out, fly tipping is a criminal offence and local authorities have enforcement powers to address it alongside wider action at national level to reduce illegal dumping and protect local environments. This is a local authority responsibility, but we will continue to work with local authorities to get waste uplift done. Thanks.
Question 10, Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the importance of community cohesion and resilience, including the role that local galas play in promoting this.
Minister Sumita Kumar.
Can I thank Colin Beattie for this important and relevant question? Community cohesion, of course, remains a core priority for the Scottish Government, recognising that trust, connection and inclusion underpin resilient communities and a flourishing Scotland for all. Gala days and local celebrations showcase communities at their very best. It brings people together in inclusive and welcoming spaces to build relationships and celebrate our shared identity.
Colin Beattie.
Does the Minister agree that local galas, many of which have their roots in historic mining communities, continue to play an important role in modern society through preserving cultural traditions, including pipe bands, and by bringing together people of all ages and backgrounds? Will she join me in celebrating the galas held across my constituency of Mid Lothian North as excellent examples of communities coming together at a time when community cohesion is more important than ever?
Minister.
Thank you for the supplementary. Yes, absolutely, completely agree with you. Celebratory events bring local communities together, and it will always play a vital role in modern Scotland. They are a powerful expression of community spirit, bringing people together to celebrate their local areas and share that, again, sense of belonging. So I will absolutely join the member in welcoming gala events in his constituency.
Brief supplementary, Jenny Young.
Tomorrow, people in Bowness will come together for the most important day on the town's calendar, the Bowness Fair. Now, there has long been a friendly rivalry between my hometown of Linlithgow and neighbouring Bowness. So in that spirit of community cohesion, will the Minister join me in wishing Queen-elect Holly, the full retinue from the Grange School and the whole town a really successful fair day tomorrow?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Jenny Young, for your supplementary. I probably won't comment on the rivalry between Bowness and Linlithgow, but of course I will welcome the celebration in your local community.
Thank you very much, colleagues. That concludes general questions for today. The next item of business is First Minister's questions for party leaders. And of course, it's slightly different this week because question 1 is for Alex Cole-Hamilton. And I call Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I'm sure everyone in this chamber will join me in expressing solidarity with Scotland's Muslim community after the brutal and unprovoked attacks on the streets of Edinburgh last weekend. That community's response to those attacks has not been one of violence or revenge. It has been a plea for tolerance and for understanding. And in a society where that feels increasingly rare, we would all do well to listen to them. Presiding Officer, new figures show that violent crime is up by 4,000 incidents last year. Crimes of dishonesty were up by 7,000. Of course, one of those has dominated the front pages this week. But while everyone is focused on Scotland's prison population growing by 1 in recent days, I want to ask about those leaving our jails. All told, over 1,400 inmates have been let out since the early release scheme began, because our prisons are bursting at the seams. But this isn't a strategy, nor will it protect the public. So can I ask the First Minister, how many of those who were released early went on to re-offend, and how many of them are already back behind bars?
First Minister.
So first of all, can I associate myself unreservedly with the comments that Mr Cole-Hamilton made about the feelings in the Muslim community? On Monday, I visited the Broomhouse Mosque along with Samita Kumar and the Andale Street Mosque in Edinburgh with Ben McPherson. And of course the Broomhouse Mosque is twinned with the Blackhall Mosque, which I think is probably in Mr Cole-Hamilton's constituency. If not, it is very close by. The feeling of unease is palpable in the community, and as I indicated in my answers on Tuesday, I met young men who were the victims of the attacks last Friday, and my heart goes out to them for the trauma and the physical injury that they have suffered. And I reiterate my absolute wholehearted commitment to give the leadership in Scotland to ensure that we live in a tolerant and inclusive country at all times. In relation to the prison population, as Parliament is aware, because the Government has been very transparent with Parliament over the course of the last 2.5 years, the prison population has been rising significantly. The Government has taken forward, with parliamentary consent, measures which have resulted in the early release of certain prisoners, although there are significant exemptions in place. And the Justice Secretary will lead a debate on the prison population and our strategy in response to the sentencing the Penal Commission's report that we received before the election later on this afternoon. I don't have the details about reoffending in front of me, but I'm happy to write to Mr Cole-Hamilton on that point.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I'm grateful for that reply. We can be sure it isn't zero, and for as long as we don't have a proper strategy around prison capacity, around rehabilitation and around clearing down the court's backlog, and then early release will be in a revolving door with people going in and out and back into our prisons. Our justice system, presiding officer, is in crisis. So we need that strategy, and Lib Dems will of course play our part in that. But we also need to use the tools that we have right now. Presiding officer, sexual crime is the highest it's been since 1971. Rape crisis describes that as shameful and sharp. And many of those assaults will have been committed by a partner. Yet the domestic abuse protections that this Parliament agreed to 5 years ago are still not in place. So can I ask the First Minister, when will his government stop dragging its feet, act on the will of this Parliament and restore the public's faith in our broken justice system?
First Minister.
Professor, I'm advised that the figures on return to custody, which is not quite the same point that Mr Cole-Hamilton is putting to me, is in the first tranche of the prisoner release scheme 13% and in the second tranche 5%. But I will furnish him with more details on this question. I share his concern about the reporting and the pursuit of sexual crime because no women should be subjected to sexual crimes and to domestic violence, and the government has in place, and we've passed legislation to address these issues. There has, of course, been a very significant increase in reporting of sexual crime and domestic violence, and very substantial increases in prosecution. That's why the prison population, that is one of the factors why the prison population is so high. So, although not all of the measures that were being passed by Parliament have been commenced, I don't think it's a fair characterisation to say the government has been dragging its heels. But I assure Mr Cole-Hamilton that the government is entirely focused on making sure that women and girls are protected in our society, and that we have, as the recently retired Lord Advocate demonstrated, a very, very front-footed approach to ensuring the pursuit of sexual crime, and that will always be the case in this government.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. I begin by congratulating Douglas Lumsden on his election as MP for Aberdeen South and welcoming our new MSP colleague James Adams to Holyrood today. Also here today are former members of the SNP's Audit and Finance Committee. At the height of Peter Murrell's crime spree, Alison Graham and Cynthia Guthrie raised concerns. Nicola Sturgeon ordered them to be quiet. John Swinney assured them there was no problem. The new Victims Minister tried to bully these whistleblowers into silence, and they back an inquiry because their testimony proves beyond any doubt that John Swinney and others enabled Peter Murrell's crimes. So will he apologise to them for his central role in this SNP scandal?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, first of all, can I congratulate Douglas Lumsden on his election to the House of Commons. It will be a very exciting moment for Mr Lumsden, and I wish him well in the arduous responsibilities, particularly in the tabling of written parliamentary questions. Can I extend a warm welcome to James Adams and express my apologies that I was not here, as I should have been, for his swearing-in, but I was detained on other government business. But I wish Mr Adams a warm welcome to Parliament, and I wish him well in his parliamentary engagement on behalf of the people of the North East of Scotland. Now, Presiding Officer, I have apologised to members of the Scottish National Party for the events that have affected the party's finances, and I reiterate that apology today. But the comments that Russell Finlay makes about me are baseless, utterly and totally baseless. But we've become accustomed to that from Russell Finlay.
Russell Finlay.
So, as expected, no apology to the whistleblowers. The truth is, Peter Murrell should never have been free to commit these crimes. Members of the SNP Finance and Audit Committee blew the whistle. but they were bullied into quitting after being refused access to basic information. John Swinney twice went on to the BBC to say that his party's finances were completely sound. He was at the heart of the cover-up then and now. And that's why he's terrified of an inquiry, because John Swinney, the king of the SNP cover-up, is desperate to cover his own back. Isn't that the simple truth?
First Minister.
President, Russell Finlay has gone on about the need for an inquiry into all these issues. This must be the first time in living memory that Russell Finlay, who's championed the interests of victims, wants an inquiry into the victim of this particular case. Now, I would simply say to Mr Finlay to give him a reassurance about the issues about which he's concerned, that I've addressed the issues in the SNP's finances, and the SNP has got strong governance in place. But I think Russell Finlay should pay slightly more attention to some of the things that have been said about him. Because in the newspapers this morning, a much respected
Excuse me, let's hear the answer to Mr Finlay's question.
Much respected former Conservative MSP, Edward Mountain, described Russell Finlay as a disaster. His leadership has been catastrophic. As we have just seen, he called out Russell Finlay's...
Can we allow the First Minister to answer, please? Quieten down.
He called out Russell Finlay's robotic delivery and lack of empathy. He thought that Mr Finlay would consign the party to the wilderness. Well, on the basis of the Scottish parliamentary elections, Mr Finlay is well on the road to the wilderness of Scotland.
Sorry. Can we allow the next party leader to ask a question? Thank you. Gillian Mackay.
Since we last raised the issue of hyperscale data centres with the First Minister last week, over 6,000 people have written to him to back the Scottish Greens' call for a moratorium. Hundreds of those people gathered outside Parliament yesterday to make their voices heard. Communities are rightly worried about the local environmental impacts and the massive strain on our energy system these applications could bring. And now Antonio Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations, has joined the call, saying that AI data centres are hungry for land, water and power, and calling for every major AI company to publicly disclose the full environmental impact of its systems. Will the First Minister stand with communities across Scotland and the head of the UN in taking on big tech, or will he continue to allow a free-for-all on hyperscale data centres?
First Minister.
President Officer, as I said last week, I understand the concerns that have been raised here about the environmental impact and the impact on energy resources that are emerging from the proliferation of applications for hyperscale data centres. So I totally understand that concern, and I made that point clear last week. Now, I've been reflecting on the exchanges last week and looked further at this issue, and I'm giving active consideration to whether the Scottish Government should provide planning guidance to balance the rapid expansion of hyperscale data centres with national energy and climate goals, which are vital to our future prosperity.
Gillian Mackay.
I'm pleased to hear that the First Minister is considering that, because councils themselves are saying they don't have the necessary guidance to decide on these mega plans. Fife Council has confirmed the Scottish Government is looking at whether an environmental impact assessment is needed for the Octor Tool application, because it's not clear enough from existing guidance. That comes on top of Edinburgh councillors saying they can't make a decision on local applications until the Scottish Government comes up with what a definition of what exactly a green data centre is. If the First Minister is considering this pause, what timescale are we going to see it on to make sure that we can take this overview of these applications?
First Minister.
The first thing I have to say is that I have to compartmentalise my comments and not comment on the Octor Tool application because it's a live application. But on the general policy questions, I appreciate the urgency of this question, because there are a number of applications that are now being considered by planning authorities, and my view is that with the concerns being expressed by planning authorities, the government has to be responsive to that. And as I rehearsed last week with Mr Greer, there is a careful balance that has to be struck between the extent and specificity of national guidance and the discretion available for local decision-making. Now, if the balance of that is not correct in this issue, then obviously that has to be examined by the government. But I give a commitment to Gillian Mackay that that will be undertaken as a matter of priority by the government, and obviously planning authorities will hear what I'm saying in Parliament today and will be able to reflect on my comments.
Gillian Mackay.
I appreciate that response from the First Minister, but local issues aside, the most significant impact of all of these data centres is the combined energy use. If all 24 applications were approved, they will use up to 1.5 times our peak energy use for the whole of Scotland. If the Government's position is that councils should be able to make these decisions locally, they can't. How are we supposed to possibly get a handle on those combined energy impacts? How many do we have capacity for? Because at the moment we simply don't know. Councils can't make these decisions in a coordinated way and planned way without the Scottish Government stepping in. The Scottish Government has that responsibility to provide councils with guidance, communities with certainty, and they need that pause that we are asking for. So while that guidance comes forward for the First Minister, will he announce a pause on these applications?
First Minister.
Gillian Mackay asks me to do, or for the Government to preside over two very different things. She asks me on the one hand to enable local authorities to take decisions that will be nice and compatible with energy requirements within the country, but expects local authorities to do that in a coordinated and organised fashion around the whole of the country. Now, those two things I don't think are possible at the same time, which is why I have to explore whether it is appropriate for such decision-making to be undertaken at local level, given the scale of the developments that are involved. So, for example, when it comes to large-scale renewable energy projects, at a certain level and scale of application that is called into the government. The government is not called into the government, it automatically defers to the government. Now, what has been raised here is quite a fundamental reshaping of the planning policy of our country and the way in which decisions are taken. Now, I'm prepared to consider that and contemplate that. I'm trying to give as helpful answers as I possibly can do this afternoon on this question, because I recognise the public concern, and I assure Gillian Mackay that all of these issues about local and national decision-making and the implications for energy use will be fully considered in the exercise that I'm prepared to undertake.
Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Before I begin, can I join others in condemning the appalling anti-Muslim attack in Edinburgh? No Scot should live in fear, and every Scot should live in safety. And our thoughts are with those who were injured and with the wider Muslim community. And I want to put on record my thanks to all the emergency services who responded so quickly and effectively. I think we should say loudly and clearly from this Parliament and across the country that an attack on one, whether it's individual or one community, is an attack on all of us, and hate has no place in our Scotland. Presiding Officer, this week also marks Armed Forces Week, so can I place on record my thanks to all those who have served and continue to serve in the service of keeping our great country safe. Presiding Officer, today Audit Scotland published their report on the Government's progress with the reform of post-school education and skills, and it is damning. It says the sector faces significant challenges, that the Government lacks a clear plan, and that reforms have not been adequately resourced, and there is a risk they will not achieve the intended outcomes. In 2022, Audit Scotland concluded that the SNP Government had not provided the necessary leadership on skills reform. 4 years on, and not much has changed, which has consequences, because every year that passes, more pupils leave school without the opportunities they deserve. So does John Swinney accept the findings of this report, and can he say how many more cohorts of young people will be let down before this Government finally gets his act together?
First Minister.
First of all, President Officer, let me associate myself entirely with the comments that Mr Sarwar has made about the Muslim community and about the necessity for all of us to stand together in the face of the spreading of hate in our society. And in the disputatious world of politics, I'm glad and I'm not in any way surprised that Mr Sarwar and I are in exactly the same position on that question. And also let me pay tribute to the members of the armed forces for the service and commitment that they give. We obviously have a parliamentary event on Saturday, which is the occasion of Armed Forces Day, and I commend everyone who will be involved in Armed Forces Day commemorations around the country. Now, I welcome the report from Audit Scotland because it is important that these vital issues are the subject of active debate. The Government, since the work was carried out, or the report was carried out several years ago, has of course presided over the passage of legislation to rationalise this area of activity, and there is work underway to transfer the responsibility for the funding of further education student support from the Funding Council to the Student Awards Agency. There has also been strong progress in skills planning, with the introduction of a new model for skills planning in Scotland, and the Scottish Government moving into a leadership role which comes out of that legislation as proposed by James Withers. And we have also begun the work on this post-school education and skills reform programme commencing in January 2026 to address many of the issues raised by Audit Scotland. The other point I would make is that and one of the key outcomes here is about the destinations for young people when they leave school. And on the most recent figures available, 93.5% of young people were in a positive destination, which was an increase from 93.1% in the previous year, which is the joint highest since records ever began. So, although there are issues that must be addressed in the Audit Scotland report, the general position of our young people leaving school going on to a positive destination, which is surely the most important measure of this exercise, the Government is pleased that we are in a strong position in that respect.
Anna Sarwar.
President Officer, it's important that we measure not where our young people are weeks or months after they leave school, but years after school, because that's what impacts on their life outcomes. And our young people are the future of our country, so they must be supported to achieve their ambitions. That means no one right path after school, whether it be university, college, apprenticeship or work. But that is not the reality under this SNP government, because shockingly Scotland is one of the highest rates of young people not in work, education or training, as many as 1 in 6. And that's not helped by the SNP government cutting 20% in real terms from college budgets in the last 5 years, or in failing to meet its promises on apprenticeship numbers. And the data for 25-26 shows that apprenticeship starts fell below 25,000, the lowest number for over a decade, excluding the period of the pandemic. So if we are serious about ensuring every young person has a chance to succeed, then the system has to change. So will John Swinney commit today that every young person who is qualified for an apprenticeship will have the guarantee of being able to access one?
First Minister.
So on a couple of points that Mr Sarwar raised, in relation to college funding, the Government increased in the budget that's just been put into practice. The budget for core college funding increased by 10% to £764 million. So we have recognised some of the financial challenges that exist in our college sector. Now, on apprenticeships, we are providing £198 million a year to support 25,500 new modern apprenticeships, 5,000 new foundation apprenticeships and over 1,200 new graduate apprenticeships. Now, this also supports over 39,000 modern apprentices already in training, and we committed in our manifesto to ensuring that we increased the number of apprenticeships to 150,000 over the course of the Parliament. So I'm a huge supporter of apprenticeship programmes. I think the reforms that the Government brought in with both foundation apprenticeships and graduate apprenticeships have been really important reforms that the Government has brought forward, which create new and successful pathways for young people, and I'm determined to make sure that every young person has that desirable pathway for their future.
Anna Sarwar.
President Officer, the measure of success is whether young people get the opportunities they deserve and whether our businesses and the economy have the skills supply chain that they need. Because, according to the Open University, over half of Scotland's employers say they have a skills shortage. And many of these businesses will pay the apprenticeship levy. And the proceeds of that go to the Scottish Government, but the SNP don't currently ring-fence it to spend on skills. That must change. So that money could be spent on funding new apprenticeships for key sectors, on creating a clearing system for colleges and apprenticeships to help young people find opportunities. And in this Armed Forces Week, it could be used to match the UK Labour Government's commitment to fund and create 2 Defence Technical Excellence Colleges in Scotland. He can make those commitments right now, because we do need to get serious about delivering a modern skills system that meets the needs of Scotland's young people. So will the SNP government not hide behind process and instead focus on delivery? Because it's time we had a government that matched young people's ambition with some ambition of their own.
First Minister.
Well, I think this is one of the issues that I had in mind when I became First Minister after the election, where I said that there was opportunity for us to make progress across the parliamentary chamber. So I think there's a lot of the points that Mr Sarwar has made today about the ideas and the suggestions he made, which I think are completely reasonable. And we should embark on these conversations about how we can take that forward. As Mr Sarwar knows, I've rehearsed it frequently in Parliament. The Government doesn't have a majority. We need wider parliamentary support for our programme. I'm delighted on such a number of occasions we are attracting support from other parties for the propositions we're putting to Parliament. So this is one area where we can do exactly that. So I invite, I'm afraid I'm not quite up to speed with the spokespeople deployment of Mr Sarwar's team, but I'm very happy for Ms McCallan, the Education Secretary, and Stephen Flynn, the Economy Secretary, to meet with their counterparts in the Labour Party to see how we can take these serious ideas forward, because what I'm interested in, Mr Sarwar will not be surprised to hear, is delivering for the people of Scotland. I think the Scottish Government is hearing that loud and clear from the First Minister, and I'm delighted to repeat that in Parliament today.
Malcolm Offord.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the First Minister welcome the recent landmark legal ruling by Lady Ross on the case brought by that excellent organisation for Women Scotland? Will he ensure that it is implemented in full, in letter and in spirit as soon as possible? Will he further ensure that the principles of this ruling are rolled out across the entire public sector, including the NHS, immediately? That would avoid the need for any further waste of taxpayers' money defending the indefensible in court. And further, ensure that informational materials published by activist organisations, which are contrary to the letter and spirit of Lady Ross's ruling, are withdrawn from all public organisations and institutions, and cessation of their production and distribution becomes a condition of any further public funding to these activist groups. Finally, does he share my relief that Isla Bryson, apparently known in prison as Isla Man, will now be retained in a male jail and upon release should not be allowed access to women's toilets, whether here in Holyrood or anywhere in Scotland?
First Minister.
I lead a government that believes in and follows the rule of law. So when issues are of a legally contested nature, we do the proper thing, which is we allow the legally contested debate to take place, and then at the conclusion of that, we follow that legal ruling. So Lady Ross's ruling is crystal clear. It has been implemented in full already in relation to the Scottish Prison Service, and the necessary amendments to custody have taken place. I do not intend to talk about individual cases, because it's inappropriate for me to do that. And in relation to the circulation of materials, materials in guidance have to be compatible with the law as it stands, and that's exactly why the Scottish Prison Service withdrew their guidance at the earliest opportunity, and developments of further guidance will be undertaken consistent with the ruling of Lady Ross.
Malcolm Offord.
I thank the First Minister for that question, which was more comprehensive than I expected. I was dreading that he would come back with a long-winded no comment, which begs the question, is saying no comment ever an acceptable response to a sequence of serious questions? And of course, he will be aware that all this illegal gender policy was implemented by his predecessor, Miss No Comment, who has now fled to London in search of fame and fortune and lower taxes. Is it true that the second edition of Miss Sturgeon's memoirs will be entitled Frankly, I don't give a damn. Meanwhile, we have heard that the Miss No Comment is to star in a TV show playing the role of a Deputy First Minister, Deputy Prime Minister in the UK. Frankly, you couldn't make this up, or is this part of John Swinney's cunning plan? Does the First Minister agree with me that the no comment saga must be part of the forthcoming inquiry into Murrell Gate?
First Minister, if you want to have a go at that.
The only person up until now who's ever accused me of being long-winded is my 15-year-old son, who tells me to shorten my answers in Parliament on a regular basis. So I think, for the benefit of currying favour with the presiding officer, I'll keep this one short. Mr Offord's contribution. Oh, it's all very funny, Mr Kerr. You're always laughing at things. Mr Kerr was laughing at the very substantial points made by Daniel Johnson in the debate, where Mr Kerr trivialised the attacks on Muslim members of our community, which is an absolute disgrace. And if anyone who voted reform was watching the exchange, Mr Offord's question to me there just now, I think they would think what a waste of time it was voting for reform, because that was just an insulting lot of drivel from Malcolm Offord.
Malcolm Offord.
It is the last day of term, Presiding Officer. So on the same theme, of course, the items bought by Peter Murrell with money stolen from the SNP are now part of Scotland's political history. And this saga will be taught to future generations of Scotland's children. Will the First Minister arrange for as many items as can be found to be gathered together and displayed as the Murrell collection? Will he also arrange for some items to be gifted to Scotland's museums and galleries as permanent exhibitions and a tribute to SNP governance? Can I suggest that the fountain pen, which Nicola Sturgeon used to sign her resignation letter, should go to the People's Palace to become the People's Pen? Or similarly, the 2 toilet seats could go to Perth to sit alongside the Stone of Destiny? Or the £3,000 coffee machine could sit beside the Declaration of Arbroath to show how political priorities have changed? Will he encourage the people of Scotland to write to us with their proposals? We cannot allow for these items to be auctioned to the highest bidder, who will take them into private collections abroad. So does he agree with me that this part of Scotland's history must not be lost?
First Minister.
No, I'm going to get on with delivering for the people of Scotland.
That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a debate on motion 469 in the name of Neil Gray. We will allow a 2-minute break for a change of places. Thank God.
The next item of business is a debate on motion 469 in the name of Neil Gray on achieving